Good morning, Kuhner country. Okay, my friends, the heavily hyped and historic, as everyone's been calling it, summit between President Trump and the leader of China, Xi Jinping, is now over. President Trump is on board Air Force One, leaving China as we speak. And the question now is, over the last couple of days, what has actually concretely been achieved? And as far as President Trump is concerned, he believes that it has been an immensely successful summit. When asked by reporters, what exactly concretely have you delivered? Number one, as many of you know, Trump came not just with Secretary of State Marco Rubio or Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, or many key members of his cabinet. He also came with an army, an entourage of the leading CEOs of the top companies, businesses in the United States, led, of course, by Elon Musk and Tesla. And according to Trump, countless deals were cut over the last 48 hours that he says is going to create thousands and thousands of jobs in the United States. Companies now have agreed to invest in China. China has agreed to invest hundreds of billions of dollars in the United States, and that they have pledged to buy a lot of what these American businesses are selling. And so he says you're going to see a lot more investment on the U.S. side into China and a lot more investment on the Chinese side into the United States. So trade deals, business deals were cut. One of the biggest, China agreed to buy 200 Boeing 737 planes. So this is obviously a big contract, and it's going to benefit Americans here, because it's going to open up several factories, and the assembly lines are going to be churning out plane after plane. So Trump believes economically this has been clearly a success. More importantly, the president was focused on Iran, and he wanted something from Xi Jinping. Xi gave a public statement that he supports Trump in ensuring that Iran is never allowed to have a nuclear weapon, number one. And number two, on the Strait of Hormuz, China came out and said that they want a permanent free passage in the Strait of Hormuz. In other words, they don't want it blocked. They don't want the Iranians to block it or mine it, that they want it restored to what it was before, unimpeded, free passage of products, especially oil, but everything that goes through that vital waterway. And Xi made the point that the Iranians should not be allowed to impose tolls. So, at least in terms of lip service, what they're going to do in reality, privately, is something else. We'll have to see. But at least publicly, President Trump got the Chinese leader and the Chinese government to officially declare that Iran and the mullahs must never get the bomb and must now clear the Strait of Hormuz. Now, on the all-important question of Taiwan, and this is why I believe this meeting is historic and will go down in history as a watershed. And this is what everybody is talking about. What was very noticeable is the pomp, the pageantry, the circumstance that Trump received when he landed in Beijing. The Chinese Communist Party rolled out the red carpet, literally. They had a military honor band. They had hundreds of young children singing. Their band played the Star-Spangled Banner. I mean, they truly went all out to impress the president. Trump repeatedly said it was an incredible visit. He was touched at the warmth, at the effort, at the spectacle. Everybody raved about how excellent the food was. Nobody could stop talking about it. Not just Trump, even Rubio, Hegseth, Stephen Miller, everybody. They said the Chinese really went all out to impress President Trump. And for the Chinese, this was for them their coming out party. Because the summit was now billed and accepted by both sides. That this was no longer a summit between two great powers, but it was now a summit between two great superpowers. That in front of the entire world, and especially within China, with the cameras rolling and the entire country watching, President Trump and Xi Jinping at a very important state banquet dinner were toasting each other, very, similar to Nixon and Mao in the 1970s. And Xi Jinping let it be known that China is now a superpower. And President Trump had no choice but to acknowledge and accept that China is now a superpower, a true rival, and someone who is now essentially on a par with the United States. They stood shoulder to shoulder. Clearly now China is flexing their economic and military muscles. Both talked about the need for having stability and prosperity and mutual respect in their relationship. As President Trump said, the China-U.S. relationship is the most consequential relationship in history. In other words, now, what came out of the summit was a public acknowledgement that the world now has not one, but now two superpowers. And that essentially all major world issues now, like in the Cold War, would involve the United States and the Soviet Union to settle, essentially now are going to be between China and the United States to settle. I think there will be no going back from this, at least in our lifetime. And then came up the issue of Taiwan. And never before has a Chinese leader spoken so brazenly and openly to a president of the United States the way Xi Jinping did in his talks with Trump. Usually it's done through the foreign minister, it's done through the state media, it's done through the foreign ministry, but this time Xi Jinping looked at Trump, and this was widely reported because there was a room full of dignitaries and obviously Trump's team, the Chinese team, where, and this is historically very, very important, Xi Jinping looked at Trump and said, we are going to have potentially the most prosperous, cooperative, mutually beneficial relationship in human history. But there is now one issue that stands in our way, and that is the issue of Taiwan. Taiwan, according to Xi Jinping, is the one issue that if it is mishandled, his words, could lead us to not just a confrontation, but an outright conflict and maybe even war. And so what he essentially told the President of the United States, we have now drawn a red line. Taiwan eventually must be ours. And if you decide to try to pull Taiwan out of our strategic orbit, wink, wink, like you tried to do with Ukraine vis-a-vis Russia, you will unleash World War III. This is now our red line. And then he used an historical analogy. And this is the analogy that is going to represent the essence of this summit. Xi told Trump to avoid the, quote, Thucydides trap. Thucydides was the famous ancient Greek historian who wrote about the Peloponnesian War, in which he said that the established power Sparta, challenged by the rising power Athens, led to a disastrous war. Okay, so the question now is, who got the better of the exchange of the deals that were cut in Beijing between China and the United States? And it seems to me very clearly that Trump, to me, really got the best of what was humanly possible to achieve given the limits of the relationship. We are not a totalitarian country, thank the Lord, unlike China. We are not a country that is inherently expansionist and menaces and threatens its neighbors like China. And we are not looking to destabilize much of the world as is China. And so it seems to me that there are obvious problems in the relationship. I know they're trying to make it as functional, as stable, as mutually beneficial as possible because China has the world's largest military, land army. They are also a massive nuclear power. And of course, economically now, they're a behemoth. And so we're going to try as much as possible to get along with China. And that's what Trump was trying to, that's what he was trying to achieve at the summit. But what will go down in history, and this is now the question, is are we willing to sacrifice Taiwan? And what was clear, and Rubio said it, and Hegseth said it, everybody within Trump's orbit said from the moment we landed, Chinese officials have been aggressively pushing us on Taiwan. They want us to soften our support for Taiwan and eventually to give China a green light to be able to reunify what they see as their territory, Taiwan, with the mainland, with China. Now, so far, from everything that's come out of the summit, Xi did not get what he wanted. Trump is not willing to sacrifice Taiwan. But what Xi did is that he put Trump on notice, as I said in my opening monologue, that Taiwan is for China a red line. And that now you are not dealing anymore with just a regional power or even a great power. You are now dealing with a superpower. And superpowers have spheres of influence, and superpowers have red lines. And Xi told Trump, this is our red line. Don't cross it. I'm telling you, don't cross it. Because you're going to get, wink, wink, what happened between Russia and Ukraine, except it'll be between you and me, China and America, which, as Xi said, would be a quote-unquote catastrophe for the world. I.e., without saying World War III, he meant World War III. Now, the key, this is very important. Thucydides was a ancient Greece historian, from ancient Greek, an historian of ancient Greek, 4th century BC. And there was a war, a famous war called the Peloponnesian War, which essentially destroyed both Sparta and Athens. Mutually destructive. And in the end, it ended up, Sparta won some battles, Athens won other battles, but in the end, it destroyed these two great city-states. Sparta was considered the dominant power, the hegemon, if you want to bring it to today, the United States of its time. Athens was the rising power that was challenging the dominant hegemon and looking now to become an equal of Sparta. And what happened is, by rising so quickly, and by Sparta not being able to accommodate this new rising power, it led to a disastrous, catastrophic war that in the end destroyed Sparta and Athens. Both of them went down in flames, never to recover again. In his meeting with Trump, and this is why everybody is quoting the Thucydides trap. In history, historians have called the Thucydides trap something that has happened over and over again. They cite World War I as an example. You had England or Britain, which was the dominant power in Europe. Germany was the rising power, about to catch and maybe surpass Britain. What did that lead to? A disastrous war, World War I. Xi told Trump, quote unquote, you must avoid the Thucydides trap, meaning you're Sparta, I'm Athens, we're rising. Don't underestimate us. Don't mishandle us the way this has happened between great powers, an established power, and a rising power, because this will lead to war. And the key issue, he says, that you can mishandle is Taiwan. If you want to encourage Taiwanese independence, it will lead to war. If you continue to arm Taiwan, it will lead to war. If you try to pull Taiwan out of our orbit, it will lead to war. Now, the other flip side of this, and this is what the Americans are talking about literally on the plane, is now remember, the assumption is that we're in decline. 617-266-6868. Okay, just to finish that point, because it's got such implications in what Xi was telling Trump. So he basically now, look, China is out of the closet, as they say. We now know exactly where they stand. And what they're telling us is, no. We're telling you we're Athens and you're Sparta. And if you don't take care of the relationship, you, the United States, you, Sparta, you could trigger a disastrous war that, yeah, it may destroy us, but it will destroy you. And so if you're smart, you should not let Taiwan come between you and us having a very successful, beneficial, prosperous relationship. At one point, in fact, Xi openly tells Trump, this is at a toast, essentially says the world depends on us now. And the way he phrased it, and I'll play the cuts, I promise, but the way he phrased it, don't take my word for it, was, well, we're 1.4 billion, almost 1.5 billion people, and you are 300 million. Actually, we're more like 330, 340. But this is deliberate. It's all psychological. So, in other words, we're so much more populous than you are. We have so many more people. But together, we can solve the world's problems, i.e., we can divide up the world into separate spheres of influence. Okay? We are now the two great superpowers. Like you were with the Soviet Union, now it's you and us. But we're telling you that Taiwan could lead to a hot war. Not a cold war, but a hot war. And this would be an absolute, as he put it, peril, a catastrophe, as he said, for you, for us, and for the entire world. Now, what Rubio and Hegseth, and of course the president and his national security team are already discussing on the plane is what's being reported in the media, which is not just that this was a threat and China basically now coming out and saying, we are on an equal par with you and we want to be treated as an equal in every single way. But Xi is telling us that as far as the Chinese Communist Party is concerned, according to them, this is their belief. It's not a reality. It's just their belief. They believe we're in decline. We're in decline militarily. We're in decline economically. We're in decline culturally. And that they are now the new ascendant, surging, rising power. That eventually they will eclipse and surpass us. Now, it's not just that they're warning us, but let me tell you what the Americans are rightly thinking, 1,000%. Hey, buddy, don't think too well of yourself. Don't overestimate your strength. Don't think you're bigger than what you actually really are, because that could also lead to a fundamental miscalculation. Don't start throwing your weight around thinking you're unbeatable or invincible when you're not. Because it's not just the established power, Sparta, which could lead to a quote-unquote trap that leads to a war. It's also the rising power who overestimates their strength and overestimates their influence and their capabilities, and by prematurely challenging the established power, they can maybe start a war that is disastrous for both sides and will be especially a catastrophe for China. Now, what Xi does not get, or at least maybe he gets, but he's bluffing, China right now is in a severe recession. That's just a fact. Economically, they're in a recession. Number two, they have an aging population. They're not a young country. They're an old country. And most importantly, China's economy depends upon exports. They are not a self-sufficient country. For example, one of the biggest developments from the summit, again, Trump playing 3D chess. He got the Chinese to agree to buy American oil. He basically said, look, can you really depend on the Iranians? Can you really trust them? And look at now how unstable the Strait of Hormuz has become. You guys want to tie your economy to that? Xi, you want that? Is that in your self-interest, Xi? But we've got all the oil in the world, man. And there's no Strait of Hormuz. It'll be free. It'll be unimpeded. You won't have any problems. You'll have safe, secure passage for every oil tanker. And so Xi has now agreed to buy a lot more American oil. So now Trump is starting to make China dependent upon us for its economic lifeblood, oil. So, the Chinese, you think you're holding all these cards. I'm talking about the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party. You don't have that many cards. You don't have the leverage you think you have. You have some leverage. There's no question. There's no question. But hey, don't overestimate yourself, because that can also lead to miscalculations. Now, what is very clear, I just want to play a couple of cuts, and then I'm going to go to the phone lines, because there were things said deliberately. This wasn't an accident. This was, Trump went through the speech, what he was going to say to Xi. Xi went through his speech, what he was going to say to Trump. Every single word was deliberately thought through. Nothing is thrown in for no reason. So there's a lot there. Now, this is what Trump said to Xi. And it made news right away. Absolutely right away. Xi is standing maybe 6 feet away from Trump. Trump is holding up a glass. Everyone is holding up their glass. And he says, our relationship goes all the way back to America's founding. So he's trying to say, look, historically, we've always been very good friends. This is a deep, long-standing relationship. and it's almost intertwined in our history. And Trump is saying, I want us to have a great, peaceful, stable, enduring relationship. Because what has now happened, and I'm acknowledging this, is that you, China, have arrived. And the most important relationship for the United States is no longer between us and Europe, or us and Russia, or us and any other country in the world, Great Britain, the special relationship. No. It's now you and me, the United States and China. Roll cut 1A, Mike.
The relationship between the American and Chinese people goes all the way back to America's founding. The first American consul to China, Samuel Shaw, arrived on the first American trading ship to reach these shores in 1784. The Chinese merchants had a name for the Americans. They called their visions the New People. 2.5 centuries later, that first connection has grown into one of the most consequential relationships in world history.
One of the most consequential relationships in world history. Trump has never said that to any other country. He's never said it to Russia, in front of Putin, or to the entire European Union, or to France, or to Britain, or to Germany, or I don't care. Take your pick. Any India, but he said it to China, and that went everywhere. And then I'm going to play one more cut on the other side, I promise, and then I'm going to take all of your calls. What is very, very clear is that Trump now understands that the future of world peace, the future of world stability, now depends upon how we deal with the China issue and our relationship with China. 617-266-6868 is the number. Okay, so President Trump, and by the way, these were both very long toasts. It just went on and on and on. So Trump started, and then, of course, Xi Jinping reciprocated. So Trump now is essentially telling Xi, we can do so much together. There's no question. The sky's the limit, both for the United States and for China. And he doesn't mention Taiwan. He never mentions Taiwan. But he's trying to basically tell him, yeah, I get it. You guys keep telling us how important Taiwan is to you. I'm also trying to remind you, don't let Taiwan blow up, potentially undermine and destroy everything that we can build together. In other words, it goes both ways. You don't want us to push too hard on Taiwan. I get it. But don't let Taiwan be the stick of dynamite that blows up what could be one of the most, beneficial and mutually prosperous relationships ever. So listen now to Trump saying we've got a deep bond. It stretches back 250 years. And anyway, he uses a phrase that also now it's going to live on after this summit. Roll cut 3A, Mike.
This bond of commerce and respect that stretches back 250 years is the foundation for a future that benefits both of our nations. The American and Chinese people share much in common. We value hard work. We value courage and achievement. We love our families and we love our countries. Together we have the chance to draw on these values to create a future of greater prosperity, cooperation, and happiness, and peace for our children. We love our children. This region and the world, it's a special world with the two of us united and together.
A special world. A special world. Right? He's saying, look, peace for our children, meaning no war, no World War III. Let's avoid confrontation. Greater prosperity, greater wealth, greater stability, greater peace. This region, your region, Asia, the whole world, it can be a special world with the two of us united and together. In other words, wink, wink. Is Taiwan worth blowing all this up? Or at least potentially jeopardizing all this? I mean, that's the undercurrent. And then this is the line. And the line that is going to live on after this summit, it's the line that's being repeated in China. It's the line that's being repeated around the world. And soon it's going to be the line that's going to be repeated here in the United States. President Trump thanked Xi again for the hospitality, the pageantry, the pomp, the circumstance, the warmth. They really, really went all out to impress the president. There's no question. And then he returned the favor, saying, I want to invite you and your wife, September 24th. I want you to come to the White House. I want you to come to the United States, and we are going to reciprocate. Just as, as warm and gracious as you were to us, I want to be as warm and gracious to you. And then he inserts a very specific phrase. Roll cut for Mike.
Thank you again, President Xi, for this beautiful welcome. And tonight it is my honor to extend an invitation to you and Madam Peng to visit us at the White House this September 24th. And we look forward to it. And I'd now like to raise a glass and propose a toast to the rich and enduring ties between the American and Chinese people. It's a very special relationship. And I want to thank you again. This has been an amazing period of time. Thank you, President Xi.
Boom. The moment he said it. Boom. The moment he said it, it was on every chyron, on every TV set in China, all across Asia, Japan, South Korea, India, all over Europe, all over the Middle East, and of course, eventually here in the United States. A very special relationship. Rich and enduring, a very special relationship. So, he calls it the most consequential relationship in world history, or one of the most consequential relationships in world history. And then he says now it's a very special relationship. In plain English, what he's now saying, what Trump is saying to Xi, and the Chinese have now said it to us, is that there is no more important relationship in the world than that between China and the United States. It surpasses every other relationship with every other country. And that what you now have is a world with two superpowers. It's no longer a unipolar world as it was after the Cold War. It is now a bipolar world as it was during the Cold War. And the question is, will we be rivals? Will there be conflict? Will we be at each other's throats? Or can we turn this into something that's mutually productive and beneficial? And Trump is essentially saying, I am extending the hand of friendship. I want this to work. I want it to work for you, for us, and for the world for the sake of our children. And Xi Jinping, apparently at least paying lip service, is saying the exact same thing. But Taiwan is the big sticking point. Now, just so that you know, I believe it would be a disaster if we were to abandon Taiwan for many reasons. Number one, we get so many of our computer chips from Taiwan that almost everything we make depends upon the computer chips that are made in Taiwan. And that won't change for at least another 10 years. So economically, the loss of Taiwan for the United States would be a massive blow. There's no question. A massive blow to our economy, to our standard of living, to our military position, to our overall strength in the world. There's no question. The other thing, and this is why Rubio came out and said, we will never abandon Taiwan. We're not going to force independence. We're not going to try to change the relationship. We want to keep the status quo, but we are going to stand by Taiwan. Why? Because if Taiwan falls to China, what do you think that sends to Japan? What do you think the message it sends to South Korea, to the Philippines, to Singapore, to Thailand, to Vietnam? In other words, to the rest of Asia who fear the rise of the Chinese dragon. Another great asset we have is the countries around China fear this new, expanding, mighty Chinese superpower. They're not welcoming it. They're trying to block, prevent, and defend against it. If they would see us abandon Taiwan, then they would conclude, rightly so, the Americans don't have the stomach to defend Taiwan. They won't have the stomach to defend us. And so we're going to have no choice but to make our own accommodations now with this new rising superpower, China. And that means we will lose all of Asia, which economically for us would be devastating. And as a superpower, we would no longer be a superpower. Because the fact is, to be a superpower, we're both a superpower in the Pacific and in Europe. That's the thing about the United States. We're both an Atlantic power and a Pacific power. And what China ultimately wants, and they're not stupid, and don't let the smiles fool you, don't let the delicious foods, the egg rolls and everything else they rolled out, the wonderful food, don't let that fool you. What China wants is Taiwan, because Taiwan is the stepping stone to Asia. And once they control Asia, that will then give them the platform to become what they openly say repeatedly in the media and in speeches, to become, quote unquote, the Middle Kingdom. And this was thousands of years ago when China was the dominant power in the entire world. The Middle Kingdom. They were the center of the world, the middle of the world. And ultimately, Xi Jinping has said, our goal is to displace the United States, to reach parity, and then eventually surpass, eclipse, and then displace the United States. And he gets ovation after ovation. We will be the Middle Kingdom again. It may take another 50 years. It may even take another 100 years. But we see America's days are numbered, and ours now, we're going to be back. Back to what we were thousands of years ago. Our rightful place will be restored. That's why they want Taiwan. That's why they want Asia, and that's why ultimately they want to become the world's great power. And so for all of these reasons, and Rubio knows this, Trump knows this, J.D. Vance knows this, his team knows this, Xi's not fooling anybody. And that's why Trump has said repeatedly, I'm not trading away Taiwan. And people feared, especially there was a lot of criticism, I don't know why, but that somehow Trump would trade Taiwan for Iran. Help us clear the strait, help us defeat the mullahs, and we'll give you Taiwan on a silver platter. And Trump said, absolutely not. No way. We can break the strait. We can bring the mullahs to heel. But if we give up Taiwan, we're essentially giving up Asia. And as a president, there's no way I'm going to do that. And so, but this is now the stakes between China and the United States. And so my question to you, are we now in a new Cold War? Is it possible for us to get along with China? Or are the differences just too great? And ultimately, is Xi Jinping right? Are we, the United States, the power in decline? And is China now the power on the rise? The Thucydides trap. Or is China overestimating its own strength? I think they're not as strong as they think they are, and I fear it's that overconfidence. If anything threatens world peace, a potential war, it's that kind of arrogance and hubris. We're not in decline. We have problems, but we're not in decline. And China is not as strong as they think they are. They're strong, but they're not on a par with the United States. Far from it. Just my opinion. 617-266-6868. Okay, lines are jammed. John in Dunstable, you're going to kick us off, John. Thanks for holding and welcome.
Jeff, how you doing? Thanks for taking my call.
My pleasure, John.
All right, Jeff, in my opinion, the summit was a disaster. But the bottom line here is that the communist Chinese threatened us. And they can see, Jeff, what's going on in our country, that a good 25% of Americans are communists. Americans are not united. They're all over the place with whoever we go up against. The people go up against. That 25% goes the opposite way. And let's talk about what about the crimes China did to America, and the worst being, Jeff, is COVID-19. I understand it was done with Americans too, but they're the ones that released it. I mean, you could see, a blind person could see that the politicians were involved in it. They wanted to tank Trump, like we talked about yesterday. But Pelosi telling people to come to Chinatown because Ping had sent people over here infected, and he wanted to infect the people and spread it. And then we get Milley calling him. It's just a shot few years ago, Jeff. You got Milley calling him, licking his boots. I mean, the list goes on and on, Jeff. I mean, I honestly, I don't know what President Trump's doing, and I think President Trump's the best president we've ever had. But this is going to be looped and looped and looped over in China, that Ping threatened America, and I can't see anything good coming out of this, Jeff. And
well, John, I got to tell you this: in China, Xi Jinping's prestige is now soaring. He stood shoulder to shoulder with Trump, and he threatened him over Taiwan. He did. And, Trump, look, what's Trump going to do? Start a fight with Xi Jinping right there in the banquet hall. I have to give the Chinese their due. Again, this is thousands of years of civilization and culture. This is ancient statecraft. The CCP, they're not stupid. They're very smart. They're very cunning. Look what they did, just strategically. I mean, I'm with you, John. I agree with you 1,000%. I think China should be made to pay reparations for what they did to us in the world. To me, Xi Jinping is a mass murderer, and I wouldn't trust him as far as I can throw him. Okay, but just to give and I believe he is the devil, but to give the devil his due. Look at how they did it. They invite the president and his team. They rolled out the reddest of red carpets. It was like he was like an emperor. The way they greeted Trump, that honor guard, those kids singing, the feast they threw him, the warm words, the banquet, the surroundings, the pomp, the pageantry, the ceremony, the way they fluffed him up, the way they buttered him up, the compliments. So, I mean, you just have to think about it. You're coming in here, and you can tell the country's bending over backwards I mean, to really, I mean, you walk on water. And, to make you feel warm and embraced and loved, and just really the pageantry was just, I mean, everybody was saying, even the reporters were like, we've never seen China go out of their way like this. We've never seen any foreign trip like this. And, and so they're so nice to you and so good to you and so giving to you. And then they turn around. Sorry, either you laugh or you cry, but then they turn around and they basically say, wink, wink, you touch Taiwan, we're going to go to war. Now, what do you say? It's like you come over to someone's house and they cook you the best meal and they're toasting you all night and they're serenading you. In fact, at one point they serenaded Trump with YMCA. It's one of his favorite songs. So they go out of their way, John, to make you feel like you're a king. But then they throw in this little veiled threat. Now, what are you going to say? You're in China. Basically, you're in their house. So are you going to be the skunk at the party? And honestly, you're going to look like an ingrate? Right? Just think about how they culturally played it. We do all this for you? And what, you're gonna stand there and say, you better not touch an inch of Taiwan or we're gonna go to war. Or, you feel like, geez, I'm gonna look like such a heel. I'm gonna look like such a jerk. And that's why Trump said nothing. He didn't accede. He didn't say yes. But, he just said nothing. Because what do you say in a situation like this? So I have to say they played it beautifully. Just beautifully, beautifully. It's cunning, it's guile, but that's the Chinese CCP. That's the Chinese communists. That's why they've been doing this for 35 years. Look at them. That's why they are where they are. So, now Trump, did not sell out Taiwan, thank the Lord. And, he's going to have to come back and, basically reset the relationship to what's in our advantage. But, I got to say this. They put him in a position where it was almost impossible for him to say no. So on TV, in front of the whole country and the world, China now is seen as an equal of the United States, is seen as a superpower in which the questions of the world are decided by the two of us. And that Taiwan is off limits. That Taiwan is for them to decide. From a PR point of view, Xi Jinping got everything that he wanted. John, am I wrong?
You're 1,000% right, Jeff. It's not a good look for America. And to be quite honest with you, Jeff, it's hard to say. I'm not in his shoes, but I would have said, I think he should have probably said something. And I don't really think, Jeff, that he should have even went there because, who knows, 30 days from now, they could have given him something, or let's say our government could have given him something while he's there, and 30 days from now he could end up having a massive heart attack. You don't know. They're very, very, the communist Chinese are ruthless, evil people, and we've already seen some of what...
Well, COVID-19. Just to your point, John, we know what they're capable of. You're dead on. No, it's funny you should say that. I thought the exact same thing. I wouldn't eat their food. Okay, let me just play two cuts, and then I'm going to go right back to the phone lines, and this is it. I've laid out the entire summit for all of you. This is Xi Jinping, toast at his banquet, at the banquet. Obviously speaking in Chinese. You're going to hear a translator. Roll cut 20, Mike.
This year is also the 250th anniversary of American independence. The over 300 million American people are reinvigorating the spirit of patriotism, innovation, and enterprise, and ushering in a new journey for the development of the United States. The people of China and the United States are both great peoples. Achieving the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation and making America great again can go hand in hand. We can help each other succeed and advance the well-being of the whole world.
So basically, again, what they're saying is we're equals. We can make the world much better. We can benefit each other. But the undertone is Taiwan. And so what Xi is saying is, wink, wink, look what we can do, look what we can achieve, and you really want Taiwan to come in the way of that? So that was the undertone. Now, this is the part where he then talks about the Thucydides trap. In other words, we're the rising power, you're the declining established power, and do you want us to get into a war? You have to understand now, if you don't treat us like an equal, it could end the way it ended with the Peloponnesian War and many other wars throughout history. And essentially, it was a threat in a very diplomatic way with a big smile, but it was essentially a threat. Roll cut 20A, Mike.
President Trump, I'm very pleased to meet you in Beijing. Welcome back to China after 9 years. The whole world is watching our meeting. Currently, transformation not seen in a century is accelerating across the globe, and the international situation is fluid and turbulent. The world has come to a new crossroads. Can China and the United States overcome the Thucydides trap and create a new paradigm of major country relations? Can we meet global challenges together and provide more stability for the world? Can we, in the interests of the well-being of our two peoples and the future of humanity, build a brighter future together for our bilateral relations? These are the questions vital to history, to the world, and to the people. They are the questions of our times that you and I need to answer as leaders of major countries.
There you go. Can we avoid the Thucydides trap? That's, in other words, do you really want us to go to war? Do you really want to do that over Taiwan? We have a red line. Don't cross it. Don't disrespect us. Don't run. In other words, don't underestimate us. We have now arrived on the world stage. Don't be Sparta and make that foolish mistake that you can stop us from becoming your co-equal. And we're telling you, on the issue of Taiwan, there is no room to negotiate. Taiwan eventually must reunify with China. It must be ours. So, my question to you, are we now, as in a sense, effectively, in a new Cold War with China, instead of the Soviet Union, with China? Is China now a superpower, the equal of the United States? And is it now inevitable that Taiwan will become part of China? And is it worth defending? 617-266-6868 is the number. Who do you think got the better of the summit? Debbie in Milton. Thanks for holding, Debbie, and welcome. Hello, Debbie. All right, let's see if we can reconnect with Debbie. Joe in Beverly. Thanks for holding, Joe, and welcome.
Hey, Kuhner, man, how you doing this morning?
Very good. How are you, Joe?
Well, at least I see the sun out, so it's going to be a good day anyways. All right. Hey, listen, as far as China's concerned, right, you know, Xi Jinping, what did he do? Draw the big red line in the sand because he wants Taiwan? Well, you know, what if you said their economy is in recession, correct, in China?
Yes, their economy is in a recession. Okay. They rely on exports. And if you don't buy their products, you can tank their economy. And their population is getting very old. They're not a young country, they're an old country.
Hey, Jeff, now, what doesn't Trump say? Okay, you want to take Taiwan? We won't fire a shot. You go have it. But we're going to give you 100% embargo on all Chinese products. You won't even sell a broom. What do you think is going to be more important to Xi Jinping? Our American market or Taiwan?
Oh, Joe, I think you nailed it. In fact, look, the one thing everyone's going on about, I don't know why the media is obsessed with attacking Trump. Xi kept asking Trump to lower the tariffs. Forget the embargo. You're dead on. But just to lower the tariffs. And Trump said, I'm not lowering a thing. So basically, Xi was begging Trump to lower the tariffs. So that's the leverage we have over them. Hey, if you think 100% tariff is killing you, wait till we put an embargo or 1,000% tariff. So, look, in a way they're saber rattling. In a way they're jostling. But I agree with you. We hold more cards than they do. 617-266-6868 is the number. Okay, just very quickly, I want to remind the great audience of Kuhner Country, the best way to listen to the Kuhner Report is on the iHeartRadio app. And as you know, we have launched something, well, I wouldn't say brand new. It's been around for about a month now. Kuhner's Talk Back Tit for Tat. It's quickly becoming, I think, our most popular segment. Anyway, just look for the red microphone in the upper right corner of the app, and you leave a message for the Kuhner Man, for Sandy, for Mike, agree, disagree, respond, react. Anything goes. You can be part of our show. Leave your talkbacks anytime during the week. And every Monday, in the final segment, we're going to play the best ones on the air, as we've been doing now for successive Mondays. So download the iHeart app, hit that red microphone, and join Kuhner's Talkback Tit for Tat, baby. All right, let me ask all of you. It is the Kuhner Country poll question of the day, sponsored by Mario's. Mario's Quality Roofing, Siding, and Windows. And this is one of the most important poll questions I've ever asked. And on the surface, you're going to think it's almost a bit of a niche or a boutique issue. You're going to say, well, do I really want to weigh in on this? I think it could be sort of what the Sudetenland, was to the 1930s. It's this part of the in that case it was Europe, but a part of the world whose name, appears in the media. People talk about it, but they don't really think it through. But it's just there as a thorny issue. And if it's not handled properly, it could spark a potential world war. So let me ask all of you, will the United States intercede? Will the United States intervene if China tries to force reunification with Taiwan? It's clearly what Xi wants to do. He couldn't have telegraphed it more obviously. They want Taiwan, and they want to reincorporate it, force it back into the mainland of China to be part of the Chinese communist regime. And they're getting more impatient as the years go on. Taiwan is a self-governing democracy, an island, and with a very prosperous, innovative, free people. They spend a lot of money on defense. They want to buy another massive arms package from us to help bolster their defenses to protect against a potential invasion. Xi Jinping told Trump that he does not want the United States to sell him this billion-dollar arms package. In other words, they want to dictate to us whether we can sell weapons to Taiwan. And we're going to see now if Trump is going to go ahead with the arms sale, or does Xi Jinping now have a veto over whether we can send weapons and arm the Taiwanese. But the larger issue, will we intervene if China tries to force reunification with Taiwan? Will we go to war if China invades Taiwan? A, yes. B, no. You can vote on our webpage, wrko.com/Kuhner, wrko.com/Kuhner, Kuhn is a national ER. You can also vote via X, our handle there, all one word, at the Kuhner Report, at the Kuhner Report, Kuhner. That's what Xi meant. I mean, he couldn't have made it more explicit by the Thucydides trap. You know, if we make a move on Taiwan, don't think we're not going to go to war with you if you try to intervene. This is for us a matter of our sphere of influence, where we consider an internal matter, one of our red lines. We can have an incredible world relationship, but don't think just because we're the rising power that you can prevent us from achieving what we believe is a key strategic goal. And Xi is basically saying Britain underestimated Great Germany. That would lead to World War I. That's what has led to many wars. Don't let this happen now. And that was the threat. Let us take Taiwan, or at a bare minimum, stop arming Taiwan, or else you're crossing our wed line. 617-266-6868 is the number. Trump will not let them take Taiwan. My answer to that question is no. I think Trump will not let them take Taiwan. The answer is yes. A, we would intervene. I don't know if the American people have the stomach for it, though. Trump, yes. His administration, yes. They're not going to sell Taiwan down the river. But would the American people back Trump? I don't know. To be brutally honest with you, I don't know. 617-266-6868. The Democrats would abandon Taiwan in a heartbeat, because the Chinese, the CCP, have infiltrated the Democratic Party. They own the Democrats. They owned Biden. They own the Biden family. They own Kamala. They own Bernie. They own AOC. They own almost every major. They own Eric Swalwell, that's for sure. They own almost every member of Congress that is in the Democratic Party. Some Republicans as well, no question. But the Democratic Party is now Chinese-occupied territory. They own many media outlets already. They own many think tanks. So you would see a lot of opposition on Capitol Hill, in Washington, in the media, to Trump defending Taiwan. And I think many, many Democrats would side with Beijing against Taipei. They won't be waving Ukrainian flags when Russia invaded Ukraine. They're not going to be waving Taiwanese flags should China invade Taiwan. And Hollywood will certainly not be defending Taiwan, because poor Tom Cruise in that that sequel to Top Gun, he has a jacket, a leather jacket. On the back of his leather jacket, he's got certain symbols on him. One of them was the flag of Taiwan. The Chinese government demanded that Hollywood take down the Taiwanese flag off of the back of Tom Cruise's jacket in the movie. And you know what Hollywood did? They capitulated. Because Hollywood wants to sell movies in China. So there would be, I think, tremendous opposition to supporting Taiwan should China invade. here in the United States. Opposition to the United States defending Taiwan. 617-266-6868. Agree, disagree. Tony in Gloucester. Thanks for holding, Tony, and welcome.
Hi, Jeff. Great show.
Thank you, Tony.
Listen, this is how I feel about this. Now, Trump never says anything off the cuff. He's very specific when he says something publicly. Now, what did he do last week before knowing the China trip was coming up, knowing full well that Taiwan is going to be an issue? He said, gee, I think I might make Venezuela the 51st state. And heads exploded. And why did he say that? Because she said, oh, don't touch Taiwan. That's my red line. Well, what's Trump's comeback going to be in private, of course? Well, I don't want any Chinese influence in my hemisphere. He's been saying it for a long time. Get China out of my hemisphere. All the drugs, all these South American countries, you do that, and I'll talk. And then, and it's going to take time because I have to prove that this is true, that your influence is out of my hemisphere, and then we can talk about Taiwan. That's my red line, he can say. I want you out of there. Now, I got to be honest with you. We have ship companies here in the United States. We got one right up in Gloucester, Applied Materials. Has always been cutting edge. We need to really start making our chips here more and not dependent on the Taiwanese.
Tony, can you please hang on? I agree with you completely. You're making such an important point. I want you to finish it. 617-266-6868 is the number. Okay, the summit now between President Trump and Chinese leader Xi Jinping is over. Trump is now on Air Force One, having left China, heading back to the United States. And the question I have for you, the great audience of Kuhner Country, who do you think won the summit? Who won? President Trump or Xi? China or the United States? Let's go right back to Tony in Gloucester. Tony, I thought you were making a very, very perceptive point. How just before Trump went to China, he said, I'd like to maybe have Venezuela. I'm seriously considering Venezuela becoming the 51st state. So Xi is putting down his red line. Hands off Taiwan. It's ours. Trump is now putting his red line. He wants Chinese influence, Chinese communist influence out of the Western Hemisphere. Please pick up where you left off.
Yes. Trump goes big, and he said this. I just have to pull this out of my hat. If you listen to him, he's been saying about Chinese influence, in all of South America. And, it started with the Panama Canal. We got all these things. And we really do need to get that communist influence out of there. It's big into drugs. We have all these countries that have gone communist there. I don't know if she will agree with it. It's going to drive Xi nuts because he makes a lot of money from selling drugs. And that's one of our biggest things. Another one of Trump's promises. I'm going to get rid of the fentanyl. We know it's coming from China. It'll decimate those countries, so they'll get rid of the drug cartels, and especially in Mexico. That's another big one. There's big Chinese influence there. I think that what he did was brilliant because that was a shot right across the bow before he even got there. So what's Xi going to do? Is he going to say, well, we're going to take Taiwan anyway? Or is he going to, say, all right, that sounds like a good deal? China, I think, has more to lose because now that they're asserting themselves, what are they going to do about Russia? And what are they going to do about the, 3.2 billion Muslims in the world, that most of them are right over there on his border. So I think he has a lot more problems than we ever do.
Oh, I agree. I agree. I think, look, I'm not diminishing China. It's an economic power. There's no question. It's got a massive nuclear arsenal. It's a leadership, and I'm going to play some cuts. And I don't think Trump is just, puffing up Xi. He says, look, I'm being candid. And many leaders have said this. They go, look, he's very smart. That doesn't mean he's not evil. Of course he's evil. He's a dictator. He's a butcher. I think he's a mass murderer. But he's very smart. He's very cunning. Trump makes this point again and again that he's very disciplined. He goes, you don't understand. With Xi, there's no small talk. He's all business. He doesn't want to talk about the weather, his family, your family. He's not interested in that. He has an agenda when he comes into a room, and he wants to achieve every single point of his agenda. He is very focused, driven, disciplined, ruthless. And Trump said, look, they're very smart people. Our adversaries are run by very smart people. Doesn't mean I'm siding with them. It doesn't mean I sympathize with them. I don't. But if we're going to, they're like chess players. Think of geopolitics as a big chess game. Yes, they're evil, or they're our adversaries, but they play a damn good game of chess, and they're serious about their chess, and we got to be serious too. That's Trump's point. You're not going up against Mickey Mouse, so give them the respect that they're due. So look, I'm not going to diminish China. I think there's no question they are a power on the rise. A lot of it is because they stole our research and development. We gave away our wealth, trillions of dollars. We offshored it to China through these disastrous trade deals. And, they've stolen a lot of our technology. They're spying on us, on members of Congress. They've infiltrated our universities, our research and development. They steal some of our corporate innovations, intellectual property. So much of what they have is due to theft. And then you add to your point about fentanyl. They are deliberately flooding our country with fentanyl through the cartels in order to kill 100,000 Americans from inside the United States. They want to weaken us and destroy us from within. That's not the action of a partner. That's not the action of a friend. See, that's the thing I don't like about the CCP, Tony, is they're two-faced. They're truly two-faced. They talk out of both sides of their mouth. So you come to their country and they'll throw you a banquet you will never forget for the rest of your life. Nobody can throw a spread like the Chinese communists. And they get the little girls singing, and they serenade you, and you have this military band, and the pomp and pageantry. Even the Brits, I'm telling you, even the royal family, do not go all out the way the CCP does. They put on the mother of all shows. And so there he is, in your face, praising you, your children, your wife, your country. Oh, we're friends, an enduring relationship. Oh, you'll make money, we'll make money. My God, the sky's the limit. But in reality, they're spying, they're stealing. They put a Chinese spy balloon over our entire country brazenly, sucking up as much of our military secrets as possible. They installed a president of the United States who they owned lock, stock, and barrel. He was basically a Manchurian candidate. He was an agent of Beijing. That's what Joe Biden was. They've bought up the Democratic Party. They bought Mitch McConnell. They're buying up rhinos. They're buying up the media. They're buying up think tanks. As I said, they're flooding our country with fentanyl on purpose. Vietnam, we lost 58,000 men. 58,000. Due to fentanyl, and it's driven by the Chinese, we lose 100,000 every year. Vietnam was over 15 years. It's 2 Vietnams every single year. And then there's that sensational story, which the media tried to downplay, of the mayor in Arcadia, California. Her name is Eileen Wang. She was the mayor of Arcadia in California. And just so that you know, okay, Chinese, every time she dressed, she had an American pin, the American flag pin, on her pantsuits, like on her chest. Her earrings were red, white, and blue, patriotic earrings. Nobody was a bigger patriot in the room than Eileen Wang. she has now confessed to being a spy and agent for Communist China. The mayor of Arcadia, California, while singing the Star-Spangled Banner and wearing the American pin, and only the American pin, the American flag pin on her chest, and the American earrings, she admitted that she was an agent of Communist China to infiltrate the United States and to deliberately perpetuate and peddle Chinese propaganda and to spread China's goals and objectives in the United States. And guess what? It was to support the Democratic Party, Obama, Biden, and Kamala. That should pretty much tell you everything you need to know. So a mayor was a Chinese spy. And there's others. And so they've infiltrated corporate America. They've infiltrated our universities. They've infiltrated Hollywood. They've infiltrated the media. They've infiltrated Capitol Hill. They own the last president. And if Kamala wins in 2028, they will own the next president. They unleashed COVID-19 and killed millions of people around the world deliberately, including over 1 million here in the United States, in order to overthrow Trump and help Biden steal the election. And this guy's standing there with a glass in his hand, and he's toasting us. And like we're friends. We go back 250 years. We're such good friends. I'm sorry. Friends don't murder each other. Friends don't send fentanyl and kill their children. Friends don't spy and steal someone else's most precious technology and innovations and intellectual property. Call me crazy. That's not the action of a friend. China, to me, is the greatest threat that we have ever faced. And the difference is they're waging a Cold War against us. They know exactly what they're doing. When are we going to wake up and wage a Cold War against them? 617-266-6868. Let me just put this on the table, and then I'm going to go to Caller of the Week. What Xi is essentially telling Trump, and you tell me if you agree or disagree. Okay, you want us out of Venezuela. You want us out of Mexico. You want us out of the entire Western Hemisphere. I get it. The Western Hemisphere is your backyard, your sphere of influence. But hold on now. Taiwan and Asia is our sphere of influence. So why can you Americans have a sphere of influence and we can't? You don't want us sticking our nose in Venezuela or in Mexico or in Cuba, but you can stick your nose in Taiwan? And so I think what Xi is trying to tell Trump is you have your sphere and we have our sphere. And if you're willing to make a deal, we respect your sphere and you respect our sphere. And that means abandoning Taiwan. Deal or no deal? 617-266-6868 is the number. 8 o'clock, you know what that means. Kuhner's Call Log, Caller of the Week.
It's time for Kuhner's Call Log, where we showcase our favorite caller from the week.
I can hear you. Can you hear me? Thanks for holding, Kathy.
So let me get this straight. They are asking us, or telling us, that we're going to have to pay $9 to head into Boston, become target practice for one of their early parolees or a wrong way illegal driver to get hit head on. Who would vote for that? Oh, we have got to vote Republican. There's too many bad people out there that Healy let go, that these liberal judges let go, and we're in the danger zone. And now they want us to pay.
On the Kuhner Report between 6 and 10 a.m. And next week, it could be you on Kuhner's Call Log.
Please, don't be a stranger. Call again. Best audience in the business. I know. Jeff. You're like a tape, man. It's true. I don't know what else to tell you. 617-266-6868 is the number. Okay. Who do you think won the summit? Who do you think lost the summit? Or was it a draw? I'm just curious. 617-266-6868. Again, just to be clear, Trump did not abandon Taiwan. In fact, everything that I'm reading is I believe he's going to go ahead with the arms sales to Taiwan. So if Xi was trying to intimidate or bully or threaten Trump, it does not appear that it worked. And, Trump did get Xi to publicly at least pay lip service and say Iran must never be allowed to acquire a nuclear weapon, and it must reopen the Strait of Hormuz with free, unimpeded passage, no tolls, nothing. So diplomatically, at least on the surface, Xi gave Trump what he wanted. And, what did Xi get? Well, he got us to continue to sell our products into China and to allow China to sell into the United States. So economically important deals were cut that are going to help Chinese companies as well as American companies. Xi desperately needs economic help because the economy in China now is in trouble. It's in a recession, and Xi's got to try to grow the economy out before it goes from a recession to a serious recession. But I got to be honest with you, outside of a PR coup of, being on par with the United States and him threatening Trump to his face and the Chinese people being impressed with that, concretely, I don't think China got very much. Agree, disagree, 617-266-6868. Eddie in Quincy. Thanks for holding, Eddie, and welcome.
Hi, Jeff. Thanks for having me on.
My pleasure.
Let's do a little history here, Jeff. Back in World War II, Gilroy was in charge of the Americans in China, and he outright said that the communists fought better. Chiang Kai-shek's people, it was like the other countries. They like to sit on the side of the Americans do better fighting. But they look at this as a civil war, just like Korea did and just like Vietnam did. We take it as we want to stop communism. So I think we go about it right from the beginning is wrong. Another thing you're bringing up, we own the oil now. We're an exporter, and all they export is their own, the cheap goods for the most part. But I think another thing that they have is this one child that they had for how many years? And that hurt them. And like you say, they're an aging population right now. You go back, can you imagine if Kamala Harris got elected? But, hello?
Oh, I'm listening to every word. Look, if Kamala Harris got elected, we would be essentially a province of China. And that's not an exaggeration. They wanted our borders reopened. That's what Biden gave them. They wanted our country open to fentanyl. That's what Biden gave them. They wanted these, us to continue to have these disastrous trade deals, especially with them, where they would just dump all of their cheap products into the United States and the deindustrialization of our country and the selling of our wealth and manufacturing. And under Biden, they stole everything. They stole in universities, in corporations. They were spying on Capitol Hill. if you were trying to destroy and defeat the United States, what would you differently, what would you do differently than what Joe Biden did? You wouldn't. You even had General Milley pledging allegiance to China. I mean, I don't know how else, how much more you want to bend the knee, how much more you want to bow to Beijing. And if Kamala Harris won, there's no question we would have become a province of China. So you're dead on, Eddie. Again, Trump saved America when he won in 2024. And you can tell they can do all the toasting they want. They can eat all they want. They can serenade them all they want. Xi Jinping much preferred Joe Biden to Donald Trump. No, he was their puppet. And he much prefers Kamala to Trump because she would be his puppet. And I don't believe him for a second. You may disagree with me, Eddie. I don't believe Xi Jinping. First of all, I don't believe anything that comes out of his mouth. Okay, to me, I don't know why we should be demanding reparations for what they did to us during COVID. We've stopped talking about COVID. We shouldn't. I want an apology from the Chinese Communist government, and I want $1 trillion in reparations. Hey, you owe us. Period. Full stop. I know Fauci was involved, no question, and we helped to fund it, no question. But that was a lab in Wuhan that Chinese scientists were working on for their biological weapons program. And Xi made the decision when it was leaked from the lab, when people were getting infected. He didn't, he could have told his people not to travel. He could have shut the borders down. He allowed them to get on planes and to come to the United States and to the world, knowing that this would spread then everywhere. So to me, Xi has the blood of millions on his hands. And so I'm sorry, until you recognize and take responsibility for what you did to us and to the world, I don't know what we're talking about. We have nothing to talk about. And as for Taiwan, this is my answer. I believe in the self-determination of Taiwan and the Taiwanese people. And clearly the Taiwanese people don't want to have any part with China. They don't want to be under the boot of the Chinese communist regime. And I don't blame them. Who would? Would you want to live under Chinese communist rule? I wouldn't. So what I would tell Xi is, well, maybe if you had a more humane, less barbaric, less authoritarian regime at home, maybe Taiwan would eventually want to rejoin you. Did you guys ever look at it that way? And after the way they've treated Hong Kong, remember, the deal was Britain returned Hong Kong to China. But China was supposed to leave Hong Kong internally alone. Often, they hands off for 100 years. It's been crackdown after crackdown after crackdown. 617-266-6868 is the number. Okay, let me ask all of you, what do you make of this historic summit between President Trump and Xi Jinping? And who do you think won and who do you think lost? And more importantly, will the United States defend Taiwan if push comes to shove? Should we defend Taiwan if push comes to shove? I'm just curious. Where do you stand on that issue? 617-266-6868. And do you think it is inevitable that China will eventually try to militarily take over and annex Taiwan? And if they do, what should the United States do about it, if anything? 617-266-6868. Steve in Rhode Island. Thanks for holding, Steve, and welcome.
I love your show. Been listening to for years. Can't get enough of it.
Thank you, Steve.
I want to start off that I just felt like this trip was a wasted trip. China themselves can't be trusted. They just cannot be trusted. They've been having their whole eyes in that South China Sea, Spratly Islands, Taiwan. If we turn our back on Taiwan, we're going to look just like NATO turned their back on us when we went into that Strait of Hormuz. Same thing. It's going to be the same. They just can't be trusted, and that's just how I feel. I think this trip was a wasted trip. China's going to throw their power around the way they want to throw it around, and they've been doing it. I think since the 70s, since I seen Nixon in 72 meet Mao. What do we have now? 5 presidents over there. Trump is the best president that I think that's been there. I don't think he's going to take any bull, but it's going to have to be. We're going to have to try it and see what happens. But I really hope he doesn't pull the plug on Taiwan, because they're a very proud people, and they do not want the communism there. I know they don't.
Oh, you're dead on.
All I got to say,
Steve,
Jeff.
You're dead on. Steve, I want to ask you this. Do you think Trump should have pressed for more concessions from Xi, in particular on Iran? I know he got him to publicly say certain things, but in other words, forget, lip service. Should he have really leaned on Xi? Hey, Iran is the biggest buyer of Iranian oil. Okay, Iran's oil, their number one customer is China. Economically, if China cut ties with Iran, the mullahs are finished. Finished. Should Trump have said to Xi, look, I want this war over. I want the Strait of Hormuz completely reopened. And I want the mullahs to sign no nuclear weapons, period. And you do it, or else I'm going to drop even more tariffs. And I'm going to hit you guys even harder economically. Should Trump have tried to get more concessions out of Xi, or did he get the maximum that he could have gotten, which, as you're right, wasn't very much?
He got more. I really do. I think he could have got more. That was the time, because we had the whole entourage that go there. We had everybody go. And I think that was the time to just push them a little bit more over the edge and see how much they could have took. But they just can't be trusted. And I think, and as far as their hemisphere and our hemisphere, the Western Hemisphere, believe me, China's got a goal. China has a goal. As far as I've been reading and studying it, it wants the world. It's never enough. China has never enough. It is what it is. Communism rules in that country, and it's like you said. What did they do to Hong Kong? And it's gonna happen the same thing if they take over Taiwan. But Taiwan is not going to go easy if it does go. I don't think it's going to go easy.
Well, they describe Taiwan, Steve, as a porcupine. Even the Chinese do. It's a kind of a small animal, but it's very prickly. It's very hard to take because they've got very strong coastal defenses. They've bolstered their military. They have a lot of missiles. They've got a good, strong army. No. I think, this is the one, if there's a silver lining in the Russia-Ukraine war, is the Beijing has looked at Moscow. Xi has looked at Putin and said, do I want to fight 3, 4, 5 years? Potentially trying to grab Taiwan and have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of, our troops coming back in body bags? Because the Chinese people aren't, they're not going to support that. And they could turn on the regime if this invasion of Taiwan goes bad. So I think that's why you see Xi pushing Trump. It's almost like cut him loose. Just cut him loose so we can just slowly swallow Taiwan. Because I think Xi ultimately is afraid of launching an all-out military invasion because he fears Taiwan could fight back the way Ukraine has. And that he could get involved in a quagmire the way the Russians have. And that's the thing about the Asians, they don't like risk. Their leadership, they're very cautious. And in a way that, Steve, it's a bit foreign to us. China and other Asian countries honor saving face is very important. It's very important. You invade Taiwan and promise a quick victory, and you end up with a long, protracted war. Xi Jinping will lose his honor, he will lose his face, and the Politburo will overthrow him. And that's the one thing Xi doesn't want to happen. So you're right. Taking Taiwan won't be easy for him. That's for sure. Steve, great call. 617-266-6868 is the number. 617-266-6868 is the number. You can text the Kuhner Man 70470, 70470. This is from 603. Jeff, I may be poking the red dragon with this comment, but what the hell, it's Friday, so let's have some fun. Can you imagine the look on Xi's face if President Trump put out a Truth Social post saying, quote, I've always loved Taiwan, its people, its culture, their love for liberty and freedom. I'm seriously thinking about making Taiwan the 51st state. Oh, Xi he'd go apoplectic. Oh, I'm telling you, the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, I mean, they'd all get the heart attack, every single one of them. I mean, it'd be one after another. No, the way I would rewrite it, though, 603, because remember, Venezuela's the 51st state. So we don't want to confuse people. So you have to end with, I'm seriously thinking about making Taiwan the 52nd state. And then say Canada the 53rd. You know, and what the hell, Greenland the 54th. You know, let's just keep on going. What the hell? 617-266-6868 is the number. Okay, this is President Trump on interviewed on Fox News with Sean Hannity, and he was asked specifically, well, what are your impressions of Xi Jinping? You've met him now a few times. This was obviously a very, a huge summit covered by the entire world. A lot of pressure on you, a lot of pressure on Xi. Spotlight was on both of you. What is your impression of Xi Jinping? Very interesting. Listen to Trump. Roll cut 8, Mike.
A warm person, actually, but he's all business. He's there's no games. There's no talking about how nice the weather is. Oh, let's look at the stars. Let's look at the sun. No, he's all business, and that's, I like that. I mean, that's a good thing. No games.
So, in other words, he's a very serious, disciplined man who has certain goals, and he wants to achieve those goals in every conversation. By the way, that's been foreign leaders have said that about Xi for years now. The Canadian Prime Minister has said it. The Australian Prime Minister has said it. European leaders have said it. The Japanese Prime Minister has said it. The South Koreans, they go, you sit down, you meet this guy. There's no small talk. He's all business. And he doesn't even care what you're eating or not eating or drinking or not drinking. He is focused like a laser beam. And then that's it. He shakes hands and, have a nice day. So they're ruthless. He reminds me a lot of Putin. Putin is the same that way. No idle chit chat. He's there to to defend Russia and Russia's interests and his interests. And when he achieves that, shakes the hand, have a nice life. I'll see you again when I see you again. So they're not playing around. Listen now to Trump also saying, look, I got to be honest. He strikes a very strong presence. You can tell when you're with him, you're dealing with a very strong leader who has a certain amount of charisma. And that charisma is felt across the room. Roll cut 8A, Mike.
I say it about him, and I could say it about some, not as complimentary, frankly, for the most part. But I say about him that if you went to Hollywood and you looked for a leader of China to play a role in a movie,
central casting.
He's central casting. You couldn't find a guy like him. Even his physical features, he's tall, very tall, and especially for this country, because they tend to be a little bit shorter.
They tend to be a little bit shorter. Only he says stuff like this, Can you imagine him going to Italy? You know what I mean? Well, I met him, a pretty tall guy. I mean, especially for, Italians. Because, they tend to be a little bit on the shorter side. No filter. Just, there's no filter whatsoever. But he was saying, look, in particular, he is one of the dominant leaders in Chinese history. He's leading a country of nearly 1.5 billion. They're on a clear modernization drive. And he says, look, I'm very cognizant. They are building up their military. They want to become, and in many ways they're now becoming, a military superpower. So I'm not going to stand here and underestimate this guy. They're serious. They want to eat our lunch. And if we're not prepared, they will eat our lunch. Roll cut 8B, Mike.
You look at the military. I mean, the military today was incredible. That military marching was incredible. But no, if you went to Hollywood, you're not going to find a guy to play the role who's good. And he said, I'll get criticized. They always criticize me when I say good things about certain leaders, and this one. But he's a leader for China. He's led almost 1.5 billion people for a long time, and he's respected. It's sort of interesting when the fake news said, he said, they'll say, President Trump said that President Xi was a brilliant leader. That's a terrible thing. What am I going to do?
In other words, he's saying, look, you have to give the devil his due. I'm not going to stand here and lie to you and tell you he's a stupid man when he's not, or that he's not a disciplined man or a focused man. Now, notice, he said this both about Xi, Putin, and other leaders, but especially about Xi and Putin. He says, look, he's about China. He's in there and he's defending the interests of China. And Putin is there defending the interests of Russia. And I've got to be there to defend the interests of the United States. In other words, that old adage, no one has permanent friends or permanent enemies. What you have are permanent interests. And that's what Trump fundamentally, instinctively understands. I have to defend what is in the best interests of the United States. And so Hannity asked him, well, was the summit worth it? And Trump said, look, I brought a lot of business people, the top CEOs, top presidents of some of the most important industries and businesses in the United States. And I'm telling you, we cut a lot of deals. Why? Because I have to create jobs for my people at home. Roll cut 8C, Mike.
The thing, those business people are here to make deals and to bring back jobs. They're bringing back massive numbers. China's going to invest hundreds of billions of dollars with those people that were in that room today. That's why they came. That's why they came. It was really an honor. We had just about every major business leader in there.
So I want to ask you, what do you make of the summit? Did Trump succeed in your view? Did he outmaneuver Xi, or did Xi outmaneuver Trump? And in the end, was the summit a success or a failure? Sandra in Boston. Thanks for holding, Sandra, and welcome.
Hi, Jeff.
Hi.
I think my perspective on this has been colored by a book I recently read by Young Chang, Fly Wild Swans. Are you familiar with her?
No, I'm not.
She wrote a book, Wild Swans, and this is her follow-up. She's not allowed to go to China. Her book is banned. And I think reading her book, you get a real sense of what it's like to be on the wrong side of the politics there. Anyway, having said that, I'd like to see Trump and J.D. Vance focus a little bit more on some of the problems here in the United States that we have with China, communist China. And let's start with Maine, the 300 to 500 illegal marijuana grow houses that are going full tilt and distributing, in some cases, very poisonous stuff around New England and New York.
Sandra, can you do me a favor? Hang on. I'm up against a break. I want to hold you over. Let's go to Sandra in Boston. Sandra, you were making the point just before the break how China's hurting us in so many ways. And rather than talk to Xi Jinping in Beijing at a pompous or at a ceremony, forgive me, with full of pomp and circumstance, maybe he should be battling the effects of Chinese influence and Chinese aggression here at home, starting with Maine. Please, Sandra, pick up where you left off.
Somewhere between 300 to 500 of these illegal marijuana grow houses run by the communist Chinese up in Maine. And they distribute this stuff through the black market in New England and New York mainly. And a lot of it's quite toxic. And it's just wrong. And I think there's a history of that kind of activity. And while we talk all the time about the precursor chemicals for fentanyl and whatnot, there's a lot of stuff that's already happening right here in our local area that we should be addressing. And I feel like he needs to focus a little bit more on what's happening here in this country. But I do not think that the trip was useless. It's always useful to get to know our friends and our adversaries better in a diplomatic way.
Sandra, I'm just curious because one of the issues that was raised at the summit was, now I know you're talking about these illegal marijuana farms, but he talked about farmland. And as you know, the CCP and their people who, with ties to the CCP, these these businesses with fronts, fronts for the CCP, they've been buying up millions and millions of acres of land all across the United States. And obviously they're buying it up to control our food supply. They're also buying up a lot of this land, ironically, very close to many of our most sensitive military bases. And many people are warning because they're doing this to spy, because they're spying on us, and they also want to steal our most advanced, sophisticated, latest military technology, as they've been stealing so much of our technology for the last 25 to 30 years. Corporate espionage, corporate theft, military espionage, military theft. Trump so far is refusing to ban members of the CCP or businesses tied to the CCP from purchasing massive tracts of land in the United States. And his argument is they're buying up land and this is benefiting farmers. And I got to protect the farmers. And so he's refusing, so far anyway, to ban it. Are you concerned that we are being subverted by the CCP, by the Chinese communist regime here at home? And that rather than focus so much on Taiwan or the Taiwan Straits or on these military islands that they're building up or whatever it is that China is doing abroad, sending weapons to Iran, sending weapons and drones to Russia, that really we should be focused more on the internal CCP threat here at home. What say you?
All of those things, but Just look at the Boston Harbor. There used to be I don't know whether you were here when Anthony's Pier 4 was a little restaurant on the Boston Harbor. There's a big condo complex there where Pier 4 used to be. And I think you'll find that there are Chinese investors behind it. And I think that's what happens when you're $40 trillion in debt. You make a lot of moves you probably shouldn't. I think the two strategic things that the Chinese are working on are controlling shipping lanes all around the world, and food supply and things like that. So I think you need to focus on everything.
I agree. Sandra, a very intelligent call. Thank you so much. All right, let me put this log on the fire. Do you think China poses the greatest geopolitical strategic threat to the United States today? In other words, if you were to look at threats facing the United States, is it Russia? Is it Iran? Is it radical Islam in general? Is it China? What do you see as the greatest threat that we face geopolitically? And is China that threat? Number one. Number two, do you feel like we're in a new Cold War? Because in some sense, to me, it does. And we were able, thank the Lord, to prevail and win the Cold War. But is China a more dangerous, ultimately long-term dangerous threat to the United States of America than the Soviet Union ever was? For starters, it's got a much bigger population, 5 times that of what the Soviet Union had. So just in terms of sheer size of people, they already are 5 times more populous. But they have a bigger military, ironically. The Soviet Union had a huge military, but China's military even surpasses what the Soviets had. Unlike the Soviet Union, China has a better, more dynamic economy because it's not strictly command and control. In other words, they're a communist regime in name, but they do allow some private property. They allow private corporations. They have a little bit of a private market, a free market economy. So there's more growth. There's more dynamism. They're more wealthy. So in other words, their economic system is a better economic system than the Soviet Union. And unlike the Soviets, they are, as Sandra rightly laid out, I thought very well, the Chinese think very long term. Strategic waterways, they're buying it up. The Belt and Road Initiative, rare earth minerals, they're buying it up. Country after country after country, they're bribing countries, getting access to all of their wealth minerals. They're setting up trade deals, and then they're trying to kick us out of those countries in terms of our influence. So it seems like the communist Chinese are much more disciplined, much more focused, and have a much stronger long-term plan than Soviet Russia. And the key is that they avoid big wars. The Russians always got caught in wars. I don't just mean World War II, when Hitler invaded because Stalin created this non-aggression pact. He thought he was safe. Hitler caught him with his guard down, and it was disastrous. But, Russia invaded Afghanistan, and that turned out to be a disaster. Even now with Putin, the long, bloody war with Ukraine, the Chinese look to avoid wars because they say wars are expensive. They waste a lot of blood and treasure. They drain and sap the strength of a country and a society. And so what they believe in is that bribery, buying foreign governments off, is a much more effective way than firing bullets. And it's also more effective in the sense that if you're going to control a country, don't control them with putting troops there, stationed, say the way the Russians did in Eastern Europe, where you have the boot on the neck and everybody knows it's your boot on their neck, which creates a tremendous amount of resentment. The Chinese do it in a much more subtle, cunning way with a lot of guile. They just buy people off. So it's softer. It's more surreptitious. People are taking money. They have a stake in keeping the regime going. So what you're facing is a regime that wants world hegemony, the way the Soviets did, that is committed to communism, but is more flexible, is more adaptable, and is very good at using what's called soft power. And a country that so far avoids putting troops, say, in the Middle East or wherever, putting in a lot of troops, fighting these expensive wars that we have engaged in as well, and that they just sit back and watch, wait patiently, and their influence just grows and grows and grows. It may be incremental, it may be slower, but it's just as real. And that the Chinese play the long game. And look, I'm just going to say one quick story, and then I want to go to the phone lines. 617-266-6868 is the number. For me, without doubt, the number one threat that we face is communist China. We have a threat from radical Islam, no question. Obviously, we don't want Iran to get a nuclear bomb, no question. But, you know, who's stealing our manufacturing? It's China. Who's pouring in all this fentanyl that's killing 100,000 Americans every year? It's China. Who now has a manufacturing economy that rivals ours? China. Who's engaged in the biggest military buildup in history? China. Who's now spreading its tentacles into our own country, never mind the entire Western Hemisphere? You know, at the height of the Cold War, yes, there were spies in the United States. The Soviets had bought some politicians, but they never bought the entire Democratic Party. They didn't buy up entire media outlets. They didn't infiltrate all of our universities and steal our precious research and development. They didn't steal our intellectual property. So what I'm saying is, you look at the way the Chinese have just managed to insinuate themselves into so many aspects of American life in a way that the Soviets could barely dream of. I think there's no question that China poses an existential threat. Red China, communist China, not the Chinese people, but that communist China, the regime, poses an existential threat more than what the Soviet Union did during the Cold War. And to me, the biggest difference of all, we knew about the Soviets, we knew about their ambitions, and we decided to confront them, to contain them. Militarily, politically, economically, socially, culturally, psychologically. It's almost like China's not on the map. And so, and look how ambivalent we are. We trade with them, we want to do business with them, we toast them, part of us likes them, we want to engage with them, and then there's another part that says, well, they killed over 1 million of our people in COVID. Well, they're pouring fentanyl into our country. Well, you know, they're buying up our politicians, including the last president of the United States. So, you know, which is it? We're almost like schizophrenic. Is China an enemy or is it a trading partner? To me, I don't care about the money. They dangled the money and they dangled the fact that they're the largest market in the world, as a way to seduce us. Look at the money you can make. And then they buy you. And then they get more influence and control over you and your country. So I would have a very different policy towards China. I would engage in what we did during the Cold War. I would contain them. I would state very clearly a doctrine that we are no longer going to coddle or appease China, that China is ultimately our number one enemy / adversary, and that our goal should be not military, but the fall of the Chinese communist regime. We want a non-communist China, period. And until we get that, we're going to do everything we can to contain them and eradicate their influence and their bribery and their corruption here in the United States. Agree, disagree, I'm just giving you my honest opinion. 617-266-6868 is the number. I wouldn't give Xi the time of day. I agree with one of the previous callers. You can't trust them. I don't think they don't honor any deal. And I don't trust them as far as I can throw them. So as far as I'm concerned, they have stolen so much of our wealth and offshored so much of our industry and jobs and manufacturing. And I will not forgive them for what they did during COVID. That, to me, your hundreds of billions of dollars in potential business investment doesn't come close to the damage you've done to us and to how much money and wealth you've stolen from us. But that's me. I want to hear from you. 617-266-6868 is the number. Eddie in Maine. Thanks for holding, Eddie, and welcome.
Good morning, Kuhner, man. How you doing, Eddie?
Very good. How are you, Eddie?
I'm hanging in there. I think that the Chinese, they could have 1 million, 2 million man army. Army is so outdated now with all this technology. Look at the Iraq war. It was over in a week. Everything was wiped out. We got to find a way to wipe out their nuclear arsenal with technology. And another thing, President Trump is working on it. I wish he would work a lot faster to get in a base on the moon. We've been fighting over this planet for too long. And once he lands on the moon, he's got to rename it. The 51st state of the United States. We own it. Just like that. And that would put them over the edge.
Eddie, do you trust China? I'm just curious. And do you think we can partner and work with China ultimately in the long run? In other words, what they laid out yesterday at the summit in Beijing, that we're two great superpowers. We have to work together to manage the problems of the world. Can we ultimately work with communist China to create a stable, peaceful, prosperous world? Or is this a pipe dream? During the Cold War, we said, no, that's a pipe dream. I mean, we don't want to go to war with the Soviets. We don't want to have a nuclear war. Obviously, if we have to handle a certain situation and de-escalate, we will. But that ultimately, we never said, hey, we're a partner with the Russians. And we're going to work together and cooperate. In fact, we hardly even traded with the Russians. It was, we said, why? Why would we intermesh our economy with the Russians or help Russia get wealthier or stronger or economically more modern? So we said, no, the less trade with them, the better. The less economic engagement, the better. We want to bury them. We want to defeat them. We win, they lose. We're taking now a very different approach. Can we work with communist China for a better world? What say you, Eddie?
But remember one thing, all of our politicians, most of them, they work for China. So how do we deal with them when we can't even trust our own freaking politicians? So he's trying his best. I give Trump the credit for that. He's trying to do it without going to war with him, and I hope it works out. I trust Trump, and I'm willing to vote for him a fourth time.
Oh, I would vote for him a fourth time as well. I agree with you. He's trying to do the very best that he can. There's no question. No question. Look, China now is this summit. It's coming out party. That's the ultimate meaning of the summit. China was seeking to be recognized as a superpower, and I'm not saying faulting Trump. I think they have now become a superpower, and Trump acknowledged that and said, "Okay, but we want you to be a responsible superpower, and let's see if Beijing can do it." I personally don't think they can, but Trump basically now said, "Okay, fine. Then show me that you can trade in a responsible way, that you're not going to dump your products into our country. You're going to stop stealing all of our R&D and intellectual property. And ultimately, can you help us settle this thing in Iran?" I mean, if you want to be let's say, a co-global cop, a co-global policeman, then let's see if you can, get your people in line. So we shall see. Xi made some promises. Let's see if he'll deliver. Eddie, thank you so much for that call. 617-266-6868. George in New Hampshire. Thanks for holding, George, and welcome.
Hey, Jeff. I have to apologize. I have not been able to listen to you the last 2 days of shows. So I just tuned in a few minutes ago, and I just wanted to call in and share my New Year's celebration. I sat down and I was watching. I don't know if I have Roku, so it was like Fox Live, and it was showing the different cities around the world, celebrating the New Year's. And I tell you, watching that and watching China's Beijing welcoming the New Year was pretty scary. It was basically just soldiers. It's just it was just soldiers with bayonets marching, goose stepping, and then you go to other city, and of course it's like fireworks, and it's a lot lighter mood. I think you have the finger on an inconsistent policy that we've had for decades, and that's the way our republic is set up and our democracy is set up. And that is, new administrations come up and they come up with new.
George, can you do me a favor? I'm up against the break. Please hang on. 617-266-6868 is the number. Okay, let's go right back to George in New Hampshire. George, please pick up where you left off.
Well, there's not any great wisdom I have to expand on. It's just basically that the way I see it is we need, as a country, need to agree on a policy and stick to it. I would exploit the Russian angle. I mean, Russia's rich in resources, and China desperately needs a lot of that. The one belt, one rail system. It'd be good for us to try to bypass that and make it more challenging for them to continue it. The way I see it, I don't know, this might be controversial, but if Taiwan was invaded, I don't see how we really, I just don't see us really. The Douglas McGregor influence has convinced me that it would be foolish for us to try to defend Taiwan. The village idiot with his, chip, the CHIP Act, and the last administration was probably his only good thing that contributed to our national security, from what I could see. That needs to be exploited more, and it needs to be, 3 or 4 times greater than what we're doing right now. So my understanding is there's like 3 or 4 plants that are basically coming online right now: Arizona, Washington State. We need to be able to do semiconductors in North America. If it's Mexico, fine. But I think the Taiwan thing is the 9-dash line that the Chinese think they're owed. It's going to be pretty hard to defend against. And I don't know.
No, George, I hear you. Look, I think there's no question that our dependence on Chinese chips and semiconductors in the end is not sustainable for us. It's just not. It's dangerous. Because if China does make a move on Taiwan, and we're still so reliant and dependent on, people don't realize how much of our economy, our automobiles, I don't know, electronics equipment, computers, iPads, laptops, everything relies on these chips or these semiconductors. So if we're reliant or dependent on Taiwan, and Taiwan is invaded by China, it could nuke our economy. It would be a disaster for our economy. We would collapse economically. So we have to reshore the manufacturing of our chips and semiconductors. I think there's no question. We have to make them here. At a bare minimum, Mexico or Canada. But I'd forget Mexico or Canada. I'd say, look, the hell with it. Just make them here. Because you can't be that dependent, on one country, and never mind a country. Look, it's very close to China. They're right across from the Taiwan Straits. And China is 1.5 billion. We just have to acknowledge reality with a massive military, with nuclear weapons. That's the key. So eventually they're going to try to reunify Taiwan. Now the question is, are we willing to go to war? Well, if we go to war, it's a third world war. This could lead to a nuclear war very, very quickly. So if we have the chips here, for us, that makes Taiwan less economically and geopolitically important. And just for our own national security, it is very dangerous for us to rely so much on one country for these chips or whatever it is, these supply chains that are vital to our functioning, to the entire functioning of our entire system and economy. Our society runs on chips and semiconductors. Can you imagine us, our televisions, our computers, our laptops, our iPhones? I could go on and on and on. Our cars, our vehicles, everything is on the computer chip now. No, we've got to bring it back. I think there's no question. So, you're right. Now, the leverage that we have over China is, I think, realistically, we're not going to go to war over Taiwan. We're just not. But what we can do, and this is, I think, what Trump is threatening Xi with, is we're just not going to buy any Chinese goods. We're not looking. Basically, now we have 100% tariff, not on everything, but on most Chinese goods. And Trump has told Xi, you take Taiwan, it's going to go to 1,000. Basically a de facto blockade. You're not going to sell anything into the United States. Do you understand? Nothing. And that will utterly tank the Chinese economy. It'll send it into a depression. And the thing about China is the Chinese Communist Party has made a bargain with the Chinese people. It's an explicit contract. We are not going to give you individual freedoms and personal liberties. We're not going to do that. You're not going to have the right to vote. You're not going to have the freedom of speech or freedom of religion or freedom of the press. You're not going to have any of that. In other words, what they were begging for at Tiananmen Square, and many died for in 1989 at Tiananmen, at the Tiananmen Square. But what we're going to do is we're going to raise your living standards. You're going to be much wealthier than your parents and their parents and their parents before them. And that's the thing. I have a friend. I don't want to say who the person is. He's a journalist. You can probably figure it out who it is. But anyway, he was on this Beijing trip. And so he was emailing me. We're emailing each other and back and forth. And I said, hey, what are your impressions of Beijing? And he said, let me tell you, China has economically arrived. He goes, first of all, there are fast food joints everywhere. There's modern technology everywhere. Everybody's got an iPhone, iPad, computers, laptops, surveillance cameras everywhere. Cars, and modern, nice cars everywhere. Everybody's wearing sneakers, blue jeans. Joining us now, as she always does at this time, she is the co-founder, CEO, and president of Kelly Financial Services. And yes, that is her wonderful name, Kelly. Kelly, how are you?
Good morning, Jeff. I am good. Retirement used to mean stopping work completely, but today more people are asking a different question. Should I keep working even part-time? And the answer really depends on the person. For some people, working a little longer brings purpose, structure, and social connection. It keeps them engaged and active. But for others, it can slowly take away some of the flexibility and freedom they work so hard to achieve. That's why retirement planning today is about more than just finances. It's about lifestyle, balance, and making decisions that truly fit your life. In my book, Retire Your Fear, Plan Your Future, I talk about how retirement isn't one size fits all. Your goals, your time, and your financial picture all need to work together. If you'd like a complimentary copy, give us a call or email Kelly at kellyfinancial.org. Jeff, I'll continue this conversation tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. on Safe Money Strategies Radio. Do tune in or visit our website for the Radio Rewind. Jeff, have a wonderful weekend. My best to Grace and the kiddos, and congratulations to Ashton on his recent confirmation. We're all so very proud of him.
Oh, thank you. All the best to you and everyone at Kelly Financial. To get a copy of that book, Retire Your Fear, Plan Your Future by Kelly. And I urge all of you, if you can, do get it. Call now, 888-800-1881, 888-800-1881, or you can actually email Kelly herself personally, Kelly at kellyfinancial.org. That's Kelly at kellyfinancial.org. 9:34 on the great WRKO. Jeff Kuhner, Boston's bulldozer. So just an exclamation point on what I was saying. So there's an unspoken bargain or deal or contract or whatever you want to call it. You're not going to have individual freedoms that you see in the United States or in the West. However, to the Chinese people, this is what the CCP is saying. We're going to keep raising your standard of living. Every 5 years, every 10 years, you're going to get progressively better. Life's going to get better, and more people will be sharing in this rising living standard. Now, Xi knows fully well that if he does not deliver, they're going to overthrow him from power. His power depends upon constantly delivering ever expanding, ever better quality of life, standard of living to ordinary Chinese people. And so when I was texting that friend of mine who is a correspondent for a major newspaper, and, he was there about 10, 15 years ago. And so I said, what are your impressions now of Beijing? And he said, I'm telling you, Jeff, economically, China has arrived. Boutique stores everywhere, fashion stores everywhere. There's people with a lot of money. Now, again, there's still a lot of poor people, but it's a big country. He says those that are connected to the elites, they are spending like there's no tomorrow. And when you walk on the streets, there's fast food joints everywhere. People are eating out. They're wearing blue jeans. They're wearing Nike sneakers. They've got every latest gadget or gizmo. He goes, it is very much an economically modern, technologically advanced society. He goes, there's no question. This is not the China of 30, 40, 50 years ago. He said the one thing, though, that is really striking to a Westerner, especially an American, surveillance cameras everywhere. Everywhere, on every street corner, in every bank, in every coffee shop, in every store. There's cameras. You're always being watched and monitored. It's Orwellian. It's like 1984. It's Big Brother. And there's the military everywhere. Everywhere you see the military. So it is a police state. It's in many ways a brutal police state. But economically, the country now is clearly on the rise. So that's the implicit bargain. Now, and in a way, that's leverage that we have. Because if they move on Taiwan, do I think Trump's going to risk World War III? No. Should he risk World War III? No. But we can nuke their economy overnight if need be. And that's what's keeping Xi Jinping and the Chinese communists at bay. They know that the response, at least from Trump, is going to be 1,000% tariff, essentially an economic embargo. And remember, exports drive their country. You shut off the American market, China is economically finished. And that's why I think they're overestimating their strength. Ultimately, when everything is said and done, we don't need China. China needs us. 617-266-6868. Agree, disagree. Mark in Weymouth. Thanks for holding, Mark, and welcome.
Morning, Jeff. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Mark?
I'm good. So you just took a little bit of my thunder. If you can keep the masses at bay, you don't have to worry about the media. You don't have to worry about political opposition. You can play the long game. Bear with me. I'm walking the dogs. So China can play the long game. They've been doing it for thousands of years. The Americans, we're a new society, new civilization, basically, new country. We lose the remote control. It's a national catastrophe and the world shuts down. China understands the long game. Muslims understand the long game. The mullahs in Iran understand the long game. They don't have to worry about people, opposition. They understand that, hey, I can make people suffer and still remain in power, but I'm looking out for the total good of what my beliefs are. Trump is the same way, trying to play the same game. But the American people, the media, the opposition party, they don't have the stomach for it, which makes what he's doing very difficult. So you have a lot of people screaming about the cost of gas, the price of gas, and a little bit of inflation. Well, if we suffered through that for 2 years to, A, get rid of an income tax, would people sign up for that? Everything he's done in 2 years, a year and a half, is about the long game and the good of the country. But people don't like that. The globalists don't like that. So they're going to hamstring him in every way possible. Now, if I were the Chinese or I were the mullahs, I would do exactly what they're doing. Why antagonize? Why do anything? Sit back and watch this country implode within itself like the Roman Empire did. And that's where we're heading if we don't wake up. And that's why they need to get rid of Trump so bad, because he sees the big picture.
I couldn't have said it better myself. I really couldn't. Look, you touched on it, and that was Trump's point. They've taken it out of context when he was asked, well, do you care about the financial situation of Americans? This was in regard to our war with Iran. And he said, well, no, I don't want them to have the nuclear bomb. And what he meant was, he just didn't express it that way, but what he meant was, hey, look, if you think $4.50 a gallon is going to force me to give up, or $5 a gallon, and suddenly now I'm going to, cut and run with our tail between our legs. If that's what the mullahs are thinking, the answer is no. I'm going to wait them out. I don't care if it's a month, 2 months, 3 months. That's what he really meant. But his enemies are using it, and they're just looping it. The Democrats are going crazy with it. He doesn't care about our financial situation. But we're very impatient. You know, people are angry now at $4.50 a gallon. Wait till it gets to $5 or $5.50 a gallon. And Trump realizes if I don't get these gas prices down within the next couple of months, it's going to be a bloodbath in November. Look, Mark, I want to share this with you and the whole audience because it marked me to the point that it really opened my eyes to China. Long story short, I used to have a correspondent when I was editing the sister publication of the Washington Times. He was actually from Hong Kong. His name was Qin Ming Liu. Long story short, Qin Ming was following the Chinese communists. He was writing for me on China. And he said, you Americans don't understand. This was during the Bush years. Donald Rumsfeld just came out and said, the United States will be dominant for the next 50 years. He said in China, they were laughing at him. And I remember this. Qin Ming said this to me. He goes, for China, 50 years is nothing. So anyway, the point that he was making to me, Qin Ming, my correspondent who was covering China for the publication, was the Chinese, especially the CCP in Beijing, they play the long game. They're thinking in decades and even in a century from now. We play the short game. And that's why Qin Ming was really worried because he was an anti-communist. He couldn't stand the Communist Party. He was a proud Chinese patriot and a nationalist. By the way, he ended up going back to Hong Kong, and I fear the poor guy ended up in jail. I begged him not to go back. I pleaded with him. But anyway, well, that's all water under the bridge. And he loved America. My God, did he love America. And so he was like trying to warn me and warn Americans. You know, and by the way, he didn't just write for my magazine, Insight. He wrote for the New York Post. He wrote for, a lot of good quality newspapers and just wrote some dynamite reportage and commentaries on China and their plans for the future. And he said, you don't understand. Everything they do is like building blocks. It's to become the Middle Kingdom, as they call it, the dominant power in the world. And they are obsessed with surpassing and eclipsing and eventually defeating the United States. And so he kept saying, please don't talk about, you're going to be dominant for another 20, 25, or 30 years. In China, that's nothing. But the long game is to beat you. And he said, you have to understand that. And I never forgot that. 617-266-6868. Darla in Revere. Thanks for holding, Darla, and welcome.
Hi, Jeff. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
Hi. I just want to say quickly, I won't take up a lot of the time of everybody, but as far as I am not a fan of China. I love Donald Trump. I voted for him 3 times. I just feel that, all these things, the land, all these pot farms up in Maine and God knows where else in the country, the Chinese really aren't taking anything. They're just breaking our laws. They're manipulating our laws through the corrupt people in this country that they know will sell us out, like the Democratic Party and, maybe some people in private businesses or whatnot. They're just taking advantage of our own apathy and stupidity. And, I don't understand, the people in Maine, like the woman called in a very good call about the pot farms. The government up there, the local government, the authorities, they've known about this now for a long time. They haven't done a damn thing about it. So it makes you wonder who's getting paid off up there. It's like everything here is for sale to our enemies by our enemy within for a price. And I think we have to fix that attitude, the corruption, and I think a lot of people need to go to jail, and a lot of things need to change around here, and they need a big shakeup if we're going to fight the Chinese dragon, let's say, because we have our own monster here that wants to eat us alive, is eating us alive through illegal immigration and whatnot, and they're just playing right into the Chinese hands as they're opportunists that they are. They've got the opportunity, and they're taking it.
Well,
And
Darla, you're completely right. You're absolutely right. By the way, they've bought Janet Mills, the governor up there in Maine. They bought her. Now, let me tell you what the Chinese, and when I say they openly say this is in their own state media. This is in their universities when professors are talking. This is Xi Jinping when he's at the Politburo. I mean, this is openly said in China that the problem with Americans, and I'm almost quoting them verbatim, is that Americans are for sale. And in fact, when they talked about Joe Biden, what they couldn't believe was that you could buy a president for $2 billion. That it was, for them, cheap. For them, like $2 billion to buy the United States of America, like, the world's greatest superpower. And honestly, he'll sell his soul through his son for $2 billion. That's it? And that gives us the White House? So the Chinese openly admitted that members of Congress are for sale, governors are for sale, universities are for sale, presidents are for sale, corporations are for sale, Hollywood is for sale. It goes exactly to your point, Darla. And that's why deep down they hold us in contempt. Now, I know you're not, I'm not, this audience isn't, I know that. But basically that Americans will sell their soul for the almighty buck. That in the end, we have the fatal sin, the 7 deadly sins. Our deadly sin is the sin of greed. And the Chinese say you can exploit that. And honestly, that's exactly what they're doing. And thank you so much for that call, Darla. Okay, quickly, Tom in New Hampshire. Tom, I hate to do this to you. 1 minute left. The floor is yours. Go.
Thanks, Jeff. Great show. Jeff, China is doing what made our country great. We never get involved with anybody's business. When Washington was president, we didn't help the French against England. We stayed out. What they're doing, they're staying out of everybody's business. They're putting tariffs on everybody. They're closing their market so they can become great. That's what we did for 100 years. That's what made our country great. Our tariffs. We didn't get involved with wars. So stay out of Iran. Get out of there today. Forget about Taiwan. You're right. It's their business, not ours. Concentrate on the Panama Canal, on Greenland. And get out of everybody's business because it weakens the United States every time you get involved with these wars. It weakens us.
Tom, thank you so much for that call.